When we think about foreign policy, we're probably picturing presidents and ambassadors and big national governments. But what if I told you that a totally different kind of global politics is happening every single day? And it's not being driven by nations, it's being driven by cities. So let's dive into the surprisingly powerful world of city diplomacy.
Okay, let's be honest. The common view of a city official traveling to another country is, well, it's pretty cynical, right? There was this perfect political cartoon in the Seattle Times back in 1985 that just nailed it. You have an official giving this grand speech about culture and trade, and then the next panel shows him lounging on a taxpayer-funded vacation. It's that classic junket accusation, and it's a really tough perception to shake.
But what if there's more going on here? What if those trips, those partnership agreements, and yeah, even things that seem as simple as a friendship garden or a gifted statue, what if those are actually the building blocks of a city's very own foreign policy?
To really get this, we need to explore this fascinating idea called city diplomacy. It's all about how cities are actively, and very intentionally, shaping their own roles on the world stage.
So city diplomacy is basically the process of how cities construct themselves as global players. And I really want to emphasize that word, construct. A city's global identity doesn't just happen because it has an international airport. No, it's deliberately built piece by piece through very specific symbolic actions.
So how does that work exactly? Well, you can think of it as a pretty straightforward three-step process. First, a city acts. It signs a document, it gives a symbolic gift, maybe it joins an international network. Second, all those actions start to create a story, a narrative that says something like, hey, we are a city that really cares about climate change. And finally, if that story is told over and over, it becomes reality. And that gives the city actual tangible influence and status in the world.
Now, to build this global identity, it turns out that city leaders have a surprisingly specific set of tools they can use. So let's take a look inside what we can call the City Diplomat's Toolkit. Some really fascinating research, especially a deep dive on the city of Seattle, has identified 4 key practices that cities use to do this kind of diplomacy. These are really the core moves in their playbook.
So the toolkit includes documenting, which is all about official papers and agreements, networking, which means joining up with international groups, gifting, which is the exchange of really meaningful symbolic objects, and even gardening, literally creating physical spaces like parks that celebrate and solidify these international relationships.
I know these ideas can feel a little abstract, so let's ground them in a concrete, real-world example, Seattle's playbook for how it became such a major global player.
And believe me, Seattle has been playing this game for a long, long time. Its first sister-city relationship, that was way back in 1957. Fast forward to 2015, and its global status was so legit that it was hosting the president of China. And by 2017, the city was confident enough in its global standing to issue official city resolutions that went directly against national foreign policy. See, this isn't some new fad, it's a long, sustained strategy.
And here is where it all clicks. You can see that abstract toolkit translating to real life, right there in Seattle. Documenting, that's the city council passing resolutions on international issues. Networking, that's joining big groups like the C40 Climate Network. Gifting, well, that takes the form of culturally powerful items like totem poles. And gardening, that creates beautiful symbolic spaces like the Seattle Chinese Garden. It's a perfect example of theory in practice.
Let's just focus on that totem pole for a second. On the surface, sure, it's a nice piece of art. It's a lovely gift. But when you look at it through the lens of city diplomacy, it's a deeply powerful symbolic act. It represents shared values, it creates this sense of mutual obligation, and it establishes a visible, lasting bond between two far-flung cities.
And this all leads us to the big question, right? So what? I mean, why does a totem pole, or a signed piece of paper, or a special garden actually matter in the real world?
It matters because these symbolic acts are literally how a city builds its global brand. They are the repeated messages that tell the rest of the world who the city is and what it stands for. And over time, these actions build a reputation that can have very, very real consequences.
And the payoff is huge. A strong global brand helps attract investment, business, and tourism. It gives a city a real voice on global stages, a chance to influence policy on huge issues like climate change. It lets a city carve out an identity that's totally separate from its country, and it builds the kind of trust you need to get things done in our interconnected world.
And you know, Seattle is not some weird exception here. Far from it. We're talking about thousands of cities all around the globe who are actively running their own diplomacy through these kinds of international networks. It's a massive and often totally invisible global movement.
So, the next time you see a foreign flag flying in a city park, or you hear that your mayor signed some agreement with a city halfway across the world, maybe don't just dismiss it as another junket. Instead, just ask yourself, what story is my city telling the world? And what role does it want to play on the global stage?